So I guess that we're all set.
Yep.
Good afternoon, everybody. And I'm happy to introduce the panel. I think that you probably know some of the individuals, but we will let them introduce themselves in just a minute. The panel title is Not All SD-WANs and SASEs are Architectured Equally. And basically what we want to talk about is the different approaches that service providers take for offering networking and security services to large enterprises versus small and medium businesses. And what exactly do they expect from the vendors? And we have two relevant vendors here for that offer SD-WAN and SASE, and another vendor that is providing other capabilities in the same space. And again, they will introduce themselves in just a minute. What do the service providers expect from them to offer to them? So let's start by introduction. If you can, each one of you can introduce himself, plus a few words about the company, and you'll be able to talk more about what you do in more detail, so don't make it too long.
Absolutely. Well, first check, I guess I'm the first one, so I need to check the audio. Yeah, is this? Let's try it. Is it working? Yeah? Okay, fantastic. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for sticking around for the last few sessions. I've met many of you yesterday. I'm Stefano, Testa, representing Cisco. I'm responsible for our SD-WAN and SASE business here for EMEAR and for the Asian region. And yeah, excited to be here very much. I see this panel as a next step to what we discussed yesterday. This takes us a bit, not just about the technology, but also how it's consumed and how we try to take it to market with many of you as partners in the service provider space. So looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah.
Anand.
Hey, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me as well. And yeah, as Stefano said, thanks for sticking around. Hopefully everyone stays awake during the session.
I'll make my competitor look good.
Oh, does it work now? Okay, there we go. That's why there's an empty seat between us, just in case, VMware and Cisco get it.
Yeah, it should have been.
Yeah, VMware and Cisco should not get too close,
Exactly. But,
keep your COVID distance.
So my name is Anand Srinivas. I'm at VMware in our service provider and edge BU. I'm in the office of the CTO there. The BU has a pretty broad spectrum of things that we look at. But my main focus areas are SD-WAN and SASE, network analytics, edge computing, and private mobile networks. So look forward to the conversation.
And I'm Marc Cohn. I think I've introduced myself a few times today, so I'm going to pass on that. But I will talk about Spirent a little bit, because we do have a set of SD-WAN and SASE solutions for testing, validation, and assurance, network assurance. And we do strive to become that neutral, trusted party to provide those multi-vendor testing solutions and managed services in particular.
Okay, great. And I'm Amir Zmora, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of flexiWAN. And I would want to start by saying that I'm confused. Why am I confused? Because once we used to have MPLS, and then SD-WAN, and then here comes SASE. And suddenly now we start to hear about SSE. So what I want to ask you is, what is the reality that you see today in the market? What are vendors offering in reality, and what is actually being deployed by the service providers at the enterprise space? So who wants to take the first stab here?
Yeah, I can go. So the confusion is all because of Gartner, first of all.
Okay.
Right?
So first of all, good thing is that it's not my fault.
Okay,
That's the first thing. Okay, good.
But secondly, in terms of sort of at least how we've thought about the problem at VMware, I think a lot has to do sort of the evolution to how we come to a SASE solution. And for VMware, the origins of the solution comes from our SD-WAN portfolio, which comes from a company called VeloCloud, which we acquired, I guess, about 5 years ago now. And so acquiring VeloCloud gave us basically cloud-native SD-WAN as a service. So we had a footprint in the cloud with our SD-WAN gateways, which is a hosted service that we offer to customers. There would be a piece deployed on-premise as well, which is our SD-WAN edge. but we had the footprint in the cloud, which is our gateway, and then optimized access to cloud-based applications. And so for us, SASE seemed like a very natural extension of that footprint in the cloud, right? To basically extend SD-WAN as a service to enable the service providers to offer other services as well, including cloud web security, zero trust network access or secure access as we call it, and soon firewall as a service and so on. And so that's kind of how we see it. We see sort of it as a natural extension of SD-WAN, and we see it as the service provider being able to monetize additional services as we go.
Okay, actually, I have to say that I will have many questions afterwards based on the things that you just said. But great. Okay.
Very good. Very well. Building on top of that, but it's slightly different from our perspective from a Cisco standpoint, but I would maybe connect to one of the comments we made yesterday on the panel, which is SASE, we see it more as a journey or as a trend that many customers might not even know, but had embarked on, because there's more and more services offered in the cloud, both from networking and security side, and even more, I added yesterday also the visibility assurance piece and other type of services that are all ultimately delivering the performance and the security and the connectivity between in an hybrid workspace between users and applications. And we come from a slightly different view because we invested years ago into the security stack, and we had a good chunk of that stack already fully implemented in the cloud with the umbrella stack. And on the other side, we made investments in SD-WAN. And as I said yesterday, SD-WAN itself has a set of inherent security functions embedded in, which again, are already part of the SASE stack overall. So what we worked over the past few years was to bring those two words closer and closer together from a technology, tooling, and people skills perspective. We're not there yet 100%. It's a journey, as I said, also for vendors and for service providers. And I think we'll talk later today, but from a service provider perspective, there's already a lot of managed SD-WAN services. The managed SASE, it's coming. We have a few examples already in the market, and we can talk a bit more about that. But again, it's more this journey and bringing together those elements. And I think ultimately the end goal will probably be to simplify even more and have standardized solutions. We're not there yet, not as a vendor, but as an industry. And we have options, and I'll talk in the next question, I guess. We'll have options for that, but it's definitely a step by step, and we're learning with customers, and different customers have, of course, different needs, and I think that's the key at the moment. SPs who are offering those solutions at the moment, also as managed services, it's very much still custom and trusted advisor roles for their enterprise customers.
Really, advisor roles and not really fully managed services?
No, sorry. When I say trusted advisor is I'm your managed service.
Okay, I'm managing the network for you.
I provide not just a technology or a solution. I provide also a trusted advisor role. I provide skills and expertise in helping you define the steps to take you there. Okay. We haven't talked about SSC.
Yeah, that's exactly.
It deserves a lot of time.
No, it does deserve, and maybe Marc, if you are okay with that, just one second. I want to add something. If you were okay to cover that as well. If not, but maybe to put some order, because as we said, Gartner made a big mess for us with the acronyms. So maybe you can help us out. If you want to just say briefly, SD-WAN, SASE, SSE, if you want to touch that just so people understand what's the difference between them. As you answer as you provide your answer, you can put that in as well if you're okay with that.
I'm just going to compliment. I think that what the introduction, I don't think it's not that controversial, frankly. I mean, we are on a journey to the cloud, and when we look at how SD-WAN evolves into SASE and into other systems, SSE we'll put to the side. The one thing, though, is why are we seeing this evolution of SD-WAN to SASE? Well, one reason is we look at the motivation of the customer's customer from my perspective, these being our customers, and to the enterprise or even the service provider. And one of the drivers is because the reason why managed services is such a huge part of the market now is that enterprises can't deal with the complexity, and it's in the area of security. So it's really not surprising we would move from cloud access, SD-WAN, to now security of everything, which is going to be what SASE is all about. So I think it does make sense that journey. SSE is more of a political move than a real move, if you want my opinion on it. So, and the difference is it doesn't have an A in it. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's one very nice.
It doesn't have the networking part in it. But that's when you're not a networking provider, you're going to push things that are not networking oriented.
Okay, so I'll put a few more words about this here, because I'm not sure that it's just a political move. I think that SASE represents an extreme perspective, okay? And I would also ask you something about this in just a few seconds, maybe. But the extreme perspective is that in SASE, everything should come if you follow the recommendation. By the way, it's not a standard, and thank God it's not a standard. It's just a recommendation from Gartner. You can take it or you can drop it, okay? That says that everything comes from the same vendor. If you remember on my slides yesterday, I showed it as a silo. I think I had it on my slides, okay? Meaning you have the edge device and the software that runs on it and the backbone and the security in the cloud and the management. Everything comes from one vendor. That's the SASE by the recommendation. SSE, that's the recommendation, okay? Let's see in a minute. Okay, I'll ask you if you follow this recommendation. Great question, okay? But in reality, we see all kind of variations. And we have companies that they're experts in providing security in the cloud. And that's why I think that coining SSE is a good thing, because it gives much more room. If sometimes you have enterprises that they go and say, okay, do you check mark all of these requirements of Gartner? If you're not there, we're not buying from you. So it opens the door for some more. So maybe I'll ask you now this question. When we talk about SASE, what do you see in the market? Do you see everybody and your company specifically follow the exact requirements or recommendation of Gartner, or do you see variations in this?
So let me comment on this one. So I think, at least when I think about SASE, I think about a security architecture that is cloud native or cloud optimized, right? It's solving the customer problem of users are going more and more to the cloud, or end devices are using more and more applications in the cloud. Why do we have a legacy security architecture that sends everything back to a data center, and that is data center centric, and then sort of trombones from there into the cloud, right? So how about something cloud native, distributed, and optimized for that kind of access, right? I think that's where we need to start, sort of what's the problem statement to begin with, right? I think then when you get to sort of, hey, do you believe in single vendor, multi-vendor, single pass architecture or not? I think obviously, as a vendor, we would say, a single vendor solution in this particular case is the simplest and sort of the most streamlined solution that SPs can take and monetize. But actually, what I will say at VMware at least, we do take a very flexible approach in that if, for example, a customer wants Zscaler, for instance, right, as their security vendor, we have extremely deep integrations that enables our cloud footprint, again, sort of going back to the fact that we start with that footprint, right, in the cloud. That cloud footprint has a very streamlined integration with the Zscaler cloud, for example, right, and sort of optimized access that way. So we kind of take that flexible approach. But I will say, I think from an SP standpoint, talking to our partners and our customers, the single pass architecture where traffic is going from end devices into the cloud, and along the way, it's just one service and one vendor where all your security services are hit is, can't complain.
It's great on paper?
It's fantastic on a PowerPoint slide.
Okay. I hope that nobody is here from Gartner. Okay.
Well, I have to say, we talked yesterday, right? But we shared a lot of the similar view. I would add to your comments on SSE. Candidly, SSE in itself, it's good that it's been defined, but the reality, it came even before SASE.
Of course.
Right? So convergence.
Even before SD WAN, I think.
No, meaning convergent security services in the cloud has been a trend for the last several years. So it feels like, again, SASE is the ultimate architecture goal. And then again, in between, they said, oh, by the way, if you don't really do the full SASE and just do the security part of it, then it's kind of SSE. So that's why I said at the beginning, it's probably not as relevant, but regardless of the exact terminology, to me, the question is, what are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to deliver? And the recommendation you mentioned about a single vendor, of course, as a vendor, I love it, right?
Especially at Cisco, yeah.
I love it.
Of course.
But with that said, we do recognize, and you use Zscaler as an example, brand in the industry, we do the same, right? So we, as our SD-WAN fabric is fully integrated with Umbrella, of course, our own solution, but also with Zscaler. We want to approach every customer. And I think there's some other documents from Gartner where they recommend not up to 2 or 3 vendors, 2 being maybe the max they typically recommend. But my point is different opinions. At the end of the day, the reason why I like to talk about the full SASE journey and not just security is because at the end of the day, if you deliver security, even if it's delivered from the cloud, but you don't have the optimized path, you don't have the on-ramp services into the multi-cloud, you don't have the extension of your SD-WAN fabric into the cloud, then it's only part of the project. It delivers only one element of the full project. So we like to look at that full path. And especially with service providers, very similar to the comments we just heard, we like to give components of that stack. And over time, you will see some of that stack being super optimized for specific use cases, like remote workers, where we fully prescribe and it's very easy to monetize for a service provider, just put that offer. But again, it's also very important to keep for the big project, for the large customers, and for the next several years, to keep that flexibility to allow service providers to deliver custom integrations, having open APIs, and allowing you to build a service on top of it. And at that point, hey, if it's all Cisco, I love it. But if 1 or 2 components are from elsewhere, we definitely support
You'll manage to live with it somehow.
We'll definitely.
Okay. But I'm going to take you afterwards, after Marc, about what you said at the beginning. SASE is the goal of the journey or something like that, you said. Well, it's the end goal. But no, I want to let Marc speak now, but I want to take you on this afterwards.
Sure.
Well,
maybe the audience wants to.
I think there's a step on the journey, but I'm questioning the whole premise that, first of all, I don't think Gartner has anything to do with SASE other than architecture and hype.
Sure.
So that's one thing on the record. And secondly, I think that there is an opportunity in the industry to even try to scope and define this, which is what we're doing in some of the MEF activities, to try to bring together at least a community and at least put some bounds around it. This is not rigid standardization. Why? Because SASE is an architecture. SASE is not some solution. It's an architecture. It's cloud-hosted security, and it's not single vendor or multiple vendor. It's what a lot of organizations who are deploying this think it is. And I think there's many models. And another factor is that when you look at managed services today, and I see it from the operators who are delivering managed services to many enterprise customers, enterprise customers are pretty animated and empowered, and they're telling the service provider, we want VMware, we want Cisco. They're not saying, here's the offering and it's single vendor. It's a Model T only unless it's we'll do anything as long as it's black. That's not what's happening. And when we look at managed security functions, we think there's going to be one vendor. There isn't that. Where's that vendor who can take on all the, I don't think that exists. So I'm questioning the whole premise of SASE means something. SASE is an approach. And MEF is taking that step to scope it. I think that's fair to say, but not constrain it by zeroing in the way that other standards bodies attempt to put these things into a box where it really doesn't fit very well.
First of all, I'm very happy to hear that you're not trying to standardize it in a way because it's important. I think it's
a service. It's a service definition, so it's a more high level. It's not implementation specific, and it does. The standard isn't there yet, so it's a process. Like we've been saying, it's a journey, just like everything.
Amir, he said yet.
Yet,
well,
yeah, because you know my point of view on standards, right?
We will have a set of SASE standards to help managed service providers more effectively deliver their managed services in a multi-vendor environment, which is what they're looking for. And I think we just have to be careful, because I know Gartner gets all the credit, but that's not what's really happening in managed services. I don't see that. And we have a unique perspective because we work with many managed service providers and the vendors. So that's what we're running into.
Okay, so I want to continue on that path and talk a little bit about service assurance of SD-WAN and SASE, okay? And I want to ask you, basically, how exactly do you test for service availability, performance, and what value can these things bring to the service provider, to the MSPs, MSSPs? And maybe we'll start this time with you, Marc, because the others already started first.
All right,
so
well,
your turn.
Well, great. Well, we actually offer a service, a network assurance platform product that can allow our customers to provide a range of different active tests to actually measure the end-to-end performance, availability, not to mention provide some fault isolation and sectionalization that's going to be needed in a broader, more complex SD-WAN environment. And this does include, I mean, just to be clear, the underlays as well, because we do have that problem, like the majority of issues are in that underlay, so even though it's pretty solid today. So the assurance opportunity is to, and I think Spirent and I think our competitors and also the industry in general, we're trying to understand how to apply the techniques we did in the hardware world into the software world. And this is a great opportunity because these are software-driven services and they have different properties and we have to be able to test at different levels. We have to have different goals. So we're going through a learning process with our customers, with our vendor customer, or really solution provider customers, as well as the managed services customers that we support.
Anybody else wants to say a few words about that?
Yeah, I mean, I probably want to just make a comment about service assurance in general, right? Which sort of, I think from our perspective, there's obviously the testing and just making sure and validating the solution to begin with as sort of like the day zero or maybe day -1, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But, I think from the day zero onwards, day 1, day 2, day N, there's sort of a fundamental problem of making sure that with the SASE architecture, that user experience is maintained and remains good and above the SLAs that the service provider has guaranteed to the customer, and giving visibility and insight to both the customer as well as the service provider of exactly what that looks like. And beyond that, being able, all the conversations that we've had here at the conference around autonomous networking, being able to take that data, analyze it, and turn around and actually program the network to take actions automatically to self-heal. That all sort of falls under that service assurance bucket to me. And so that's an important aspect of it as well. So just want to call that out.
Yeah, and can I throw another word since we talked about assurance? I'll probably, so from our perspective, we look at, we'll put it under the umbrella of the full stack observability. And we've invested, of course, historically, and we worked very much with Spirent in the past, right? There's an element of testing the underlying network. But what's been relevant in the last few years was to elevate and go to visibility at different layers of the stack. We invested in companies like AppDynamics at the pool application layer. We invested in ThousandEyes as an end-to-end visibility, because even if we go to a perfect SASE solution with the perfect everything under single pane of glass and everything, underlying there will still be a number of physical hops, physical and virtual hops into a security cloud, into a public cloud, and so it's fundamental to be able to see the end-to-end between the user all the way to the application. And then now we're investing internally in, we take the next step, which is applying the machine learning and artificial intelligence to deliver ultimately the predictive internet approach, which is really connecting all the insights, interconnecting at the different layers from the networking to the cloud, to the analytics, all the way to the application, and provide a predictive internet approach that can, we talked about self-healing, but also make recommendations, maybe in the future also act, but make recommendation of how the network should evolve taking into account what the performance of the applications have evolved over time at different times of the day, at different usage patterns. And we believe that's going to be, we have working products in that area. It's going to be announced in a couple of months. And so those are kind of the steps that we see. So full stack visibility, and if you ask about SASE, as I said, I didn't say it was the ultimate goal. I said it was a journey. And as a matter of fact, we do not see SASE or any evolution of SASE as an architecture working without the right level of visibility embedded. It's not just networking and security. There needs to be this element of visibility. Sometimes we take it for granted, but there needs to be a big focus on it.
Yeah. Okay, so
sorry,
I think
Amir,
this is,
just one
and then
other
I
thing.
want to turn over to the audience. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So your last comment, and then
Just a really
we'll
quick
see if we have
comment,
some.
which is pretty sad that I forgot to mention this. As you were talking about App Dynamics and some of the companies that Cisco has invested. For VMware, the reason I'm even at VMware is because we acquired a company called Nyansa in 2020, which is an AI ops company, to do machine learning and AI for this service assurance and self-healing use case. And I was the CTO and one of the co-founders there. And that's how I even found myself here. Thanks for reminding me to mention that. So go ahead.
Okay, so time to turn over to you and help us out. Any questions? No questions? Oh, great, Pascal, please. You want to just say who you are and...
I think that, one of the concerns I have is that there seems to be this idea that if you are a vendor, you want to keep your competitive differentiate by having a lot of special features and proprietariness. And you bring that into the market, and the service provider, you go with them to market, and that works, and then you've differentiated. So the vendor's differentiated with the provider, and that's great. But then that same provider turns in and goes to the next provider and sells the exact same, and all of a sudden, the differentiation is lost. What I find in the market at this point is it was never there before, but it certainly is there because maybe it's a nascent market. I find that SD-WAN has not gotten to this potential. Let me explain why. It's 10 years later, and I bet you it's not even $4 billion. In fact, I did the analysis. And that's counting underlays probably too. And I believe the problem is the market that bought SD-WAN was the large enterprises. The multinationals, the large that spent the average sale price of millions of dollars, but it never went downstream.
I agree.
And the downstream market doesn't care about SD-WAN or underlays or overlays. They just don't care.
They want to be connected. Yeah.
What does it do for me from a behavior level that I can comprehend? Okay, so that's number one. And I think the SASE is going through the exact same problem. It's not going to perform. It's not going to get to its full potential because it's going to be confusing as hell.
Well, first of all, Frank yesterday said that it's going to die in 2 years. Frank from Orange Business Services. So anyway, you don't have to talk about it too much because it's going to die in 2 years, right? Okay, so that was a comment or a question?
So I think the question
I agree with many of the things that you said, but...
the vendors is what we've been trying to do all along is trying to get to the market of some level of comprehension that people can subscribers can understand what they're getting, not in feature sets, but just basic language and what do you mean by this and that, because every vendor has their own language about, what does it mean to be SD-WAN and traffic steering and whatever, and then SASE now has its own language, except for the Gartner definition, the official standardization for SASE. And it's literally, 10 pages long. I understand that's what people are using. It's what we've been trying to remove the confusion. I think as long as the market's confused, no one's going to reach their potential. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so to that statement, I will add a question, and you can relate to the statement as well, okay? Because the statement brings me into a big question. Who should actually provide SD-WAN, SASE, SSE, though you didn't want to use the term SSE, okay? Is it the vendor? I mean, who should provide it to the enterprise? Is it the vendor, the system integrator, the big telco, or the MSP? Or should it be different if we're talking about a large enterprise or the lower end of the market? Okay, it relates to the question because
Yes.
that you don't, if you are getting it as a service, okay, you don't ask what it is because you don't understand anything in these things, in these terms, versus if you manage it yourself.
Yeah, I would say very, very fair comments. And maybe I'm going to answer just focusing on SD1 for now to try and keep it simple because of SD1 we have a good, we have a story and we know what happened and what is happening. Then I'll connect to the rest. I would agree with you to the point that historically, many of the SD1 vendors, especially startups, before the acquisitions and the integrations in the market, they had this vision that they could disrupt the market, like a decade-long MPLS market, by giving more power and more control to the enterprise. So at the beginning, the startups made a lot of money, to be fair, and disrupted and wanted to disrupt the market by saying, I'll give you, dear enterprise, the keys to success. You can do a lot yourself. And in the process, those startups wanted to monetize that by reducing the value of the service providers. That was kind of what was trying to happen.
Yes.
Then a number of things happened. One, the consolidation in the market through acquisitions. And when you go into bigger companies, whether it's VMware, whether it's Cisco, of course, we work with service providers as partners. So there's no interest in disrupting one. It's a matter of working together. But second, but we still stayed open. And the reality that I've observed, not only in Europe, but in other regions of the world, is that customers, some of them got excited at the idea, but then the ones that really said, I'll do it all, I'll bring it in, and then started to think, what happens now if something breaks? I used to just call up my service provider and magically someone fixes things. And they felt there was all of that knowledge that the service providers provided. And so in a lot of cases, but at the same time, seeing all of these functions and features, which I think they got excited on, especially those that big enterprises that had big projects and requirements, they started to put more pressure on the service providers by saying, I want more. Give me more functions, not just give me the standard connectivity or a few more things than the past. And that has put more pressure. And so this has evolved over the last few years. I would confirm your point that the biggest projects and the majority of the money, at least from our experience at the moment, is still on custom projects, larger enterprises, international, and a lot. Going down market, I believe there is still because the down market tends to be more of a run rate, service provider driven standard MPLS connectivity. That one, we needed to come to the fully standard offer, which is on catalog. And I think it's getting there, but it's taking longer than maybe originally expected. But the same, because ultimately service providers, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but it's still, if you can still refresh the previous service and continue with good margins, there's nothing wrong with it. But then when the market starts asking for more, that puts more pressure and pushes the market, the market forward. So I think we're right in those dynamics, and we'll probably repeat now. But I would agree that the complexity of managing, especially as you throw security on top, customers will continue to look at service providers and they're trusted advisors. Maybe the last comment you mentioned were system integrators. What happened is because the connectivity has always been service provider driven and owned, what SD1 did was, however, open that market. And as much as it opened it for us, that we used to be the routing guys around, and it opened to 50 other competitors. At the same time, for the telcos, this opened the market to system integrators that would have never thought of delivering one services, and now, hey, they're giving it a shot, right?
They are becoming service providers.
Sorry?
They are becoming service providers.
Yeah.
So I'll repeat the question, okay? Who needs to offer SD-WAN, SASE, okay? The service provider, the vendor, the SI, and so forth. And I'll add to that, we start to see that many of those are becoming service providers. The vendors are becoming service providers. The SIs are becoming service providers. So.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to take this, Marc?
Well, I can just add a few thoughts. I mean, because I think Stefano actually highlighted. I mean, the answer is there will be different, just like in everything else we do, there's going to be different channels, for lack of a better term, depending on what the customer how the customer wants to buy, what the customer wants to buy, and what the customer is paying for, and what the technical, the requirements are for whatever whatever that solution is that they actually want to invest in. So I think it's all the above, and actually that's what we're seeing in practice. We're seeing, I mean, that's real, meaning it's not mythology, because there are definitely a significant number of vendors who have all sorts of customers for SD-WAN, and certainly for security as well. And then we see all the service providers racing to go and deliver not just managed SD-WAN services, but managed security services to complement those, because they're trying to strive for value as well. And then the SIs, I don't deal as much with enterprises directly, so I can't come. I probably let my enterprise-facing colleagues deal with that one a little more. But I mean, it seems pretty straightforward that it almost has to be that way, because there's no one-size-fits-all when you get into these kind of services.
Yeah, for sure. You know, the bigger customers will probably expect to manage it themselves, get part of the story from the vendor directly, and get the rest of it on their own, right? The smaller customers, or the customers that have it fully managed by the service provider, will just expect the service provider to take care of everything, right? So there's going to be different models. But I do want to comment on a couple of things that you said, Pascal. So one thing I will say is I think that SD-WAN has fulfilled its promise in terms of simplifying WAN networking, right? Because, you know, the world before SD-WAN, right, Stefano, which is probably mainly your, you know, a single vendor-driven world, right? But it was very, very complex to manage, right? And manual configurations across
And to pay for.
What's that?
And to pay for.
That's true. That wasn't complex. That was just a lot. That's all.
That's simple. Okay.
But yeah, so I think from that perspective, SD-WAN has fulfilled that aspect of it. I do think that there is probably a sense of, you know, how much value and how much ROI are customers getting out of it. There's some obvious ones, obviously, right, in terms of being able to not use as much MPLS and being able to use commodity links and things like that, and having that optimization and that kind of work. But there is some work to also be done in terms of, it goes back to the service assurance comment a little bit, which is to be able to show users what benefit they're getting, right? Hey, your applications used to be this bad in terms of their performance. Now they're this much better, right? Because now that you have SD-WAN. And especially as we go, I think, you know, when you said down market, I actually interpreted that more as work from home style use cases, right? Where individual, like, consumers get SD-WAN. And you see a lot of vendors actually putting money towards that, including VMware. Palo Alto Networks recently introduced sort of a solution therein. And a lot of vendors are trying to do this. It's just, I think this market, it's in, like, there's this, you know, kind of an interesting thing of whether a home user wants their enterprise, right, their company, to procure their wide area network, right, or like to manage it, right? And there's sort of like a tension there, I think. And that's probably the biggest inhibitor in my mind, you know, to that aspect of it, right? To sort of make SD-WAN a consumer play, more or less, right? But I think, yeah, so, you know, just to sum it, I would say there's work to be done to making sure that folks understand the value that they're getting out of SD-WAN and simplifying that aspect of it. And, you know, hopefully that kind of leads to more consumers also adopting.
Okay, so I want to turn over, if it's okay.
Sure.
We'll come back to you, don't worry, just to see if there are more questions. Or I should ask another question? Okay, so I'll ask another question. I'll relate it to what Pascal said before in his question or comment about the differentiation. Okay, so I'll ask you, what does the service provider need from the vendor in order to be able to differentiate? Because if what they're doing is reselling a SASE based on the recommendation, okay, then it's the same thing. They don't offer any, they can't differentiate maybe the color of the screen, something like that. If somebody buys for that, I don't know. Except for that, not much, okay? So what does the service provider need from the vendor in order to be able to differentiate?
I mean, I would argue that, especially this time in the journey, there's still, we're far from having something which is fully standard and they can just resell and put them.
No worry, we'll never be there.
Yeah, no, but what I'm saying is the value right now for those who move fast is that the differentiator it can provide is massive. Now, to your in terms of the skill sets they can provide, the which elements they are skilled at implementing, but I would say you were asking what should the vendors provide to help them differentiate. I think a number of things, but based from my experience, one is, of course, they would look at vendors that offer a breadth of features, right? That offer functions because the market is still developing. As examples of areas where we've invested to differentiate ourselves, and every vendor, I'm sure, has invested in different areas. We've invested, for example, in partnerships with the cloud providers, partnerships with the Equinix and the Megaports, not as a competitor to the telco business, but as an extension, as a way to help different types of telcos, especially the ones maybe not fully globally present, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that element of, or integration into the SaaS providers. Hey, if one of the services that you can offer as a telco is, hey, if you connect to this 50 SaaS, Salesforce, SAP, whatever service in the cloud you're using, and we have the integration from our products, from our platforms, and get all the metrics and know how to optimize, and we give you ultimately, back to your question, what's in it for the user? If you perceive a real faster experience, whether you're connecting from home without VPN or whether you're connecting from a branch office around the world, so those are functions, visibility. So those are functions and differentiators that we have natively in the product.
But
then the other elements is also how to help the service provider build custom solutions. And I think that's a big differentiator. Can the vendor provide, yes, a recommended architectures, some great integrations, but also leave it open through APIs and thinking about how the service providers can leverage those elements to build something very specific and add their value. But I wouldn't underestimate the value that the service providers will continue to have to provide expertise and skills and building the journey, because for every single customer is different.
Okay, you mentioned, by the way, the cloud providers, and you mentioned connectivity to those applications. Don't forget that these cloud providers are service providers by themselves. They manage a very big network, in many cases bigger than the network of the telco.
Right.
And they also host the applications that the enterprises use,
Yep.
and they partner with the SD WAN vendors in order to really have a last mile connectivity.
Which is why we love our job, right? Because it's going to be an exciting years ahead.
Okay, so next.
So, I mean, what I think a comment was actually made earlier today, which talked about, hey, what's going to happen between the cloud service providers and the communication service providers, right? And, a comment was made that, hey, the communication service providers will always have, the infrastructure, which the cloud service providers don't necessarily want to play in, and the services at the end of the day, right? The managed service that they're providing to the end customer. Again, which is not necessarily in the wheelhouse of the cloud service providers, right? And so I think the way I look at it is, I don't think a service provider needs to differentiate to say that, hey, VMware should only exclusively sell via this service provider, and that's what differentiates him, instead of VMware selling it to multiple, right? I think at the end of the day, the service provider, I mean, Stefano mentioned some of this as well. There's a customization to solve the use case of the customer at the end of the day. There's the managed service, of course, right? There's the integration of all of these things, right? That kind of comes together. And I think that's, at the end of the day, how they sort of manage the overall experience for the customer. And, I don't think everything is going to come from a single vendor anyways, right? What we're talking about is WAN and SASE, but obviously there are other aspects of the network as well. There's the LAN, there's the Wi-Fi, there's, the private mobile networks. There's all sorts of other services that service providers are putting together to delight their customers. And so, that's at least how I look at it.
Okay, Marc.
I look at it more fundamentally. There's two things the service provider's looking for. They want to save money and make money. It boils down to that. So
Don't all
what
of
does
us
that
want
mean in
that?
practice? Well, save money means they want to go into a multi-vendor environment. I don't think there's any. First of all, there's no one. I don't believe even even the giants. I don't think there's really any way that you can address all the needs. So that's one thing. So we have to think about a multi-vendor environment. We have to think about a way to an example of saving money is, we were talking about assurance. I mean, in day one, what happens when we're trying to bring this network up? Well, the reality is that what multiple operators have told us, if we can't get acceptance, then we don't get paid. So there's a big driver for now understanding how we can provide some SD-WAN service readiness so that we can actually get these networks up and running, or at least get the sites up and running quicker so they can turn on the financial spigot.
Yep.
So as an example. And then from the standpoint of making money, we can look at how can we offer or enable, not offer, but enable the managed service provider or CSP to be able to offer new managed services based on, managed security we've already talked about. Another one would be things like managed reporting, or offering an extended version of that for performance and availability and troubleshooting. It's not the full closed loop. I think, as Stefano said, I agree with him. We're on that journey, but we have to have some intermediate steps. But at the same time, there is that opportunity to be able to not just provide reporting from, vendor A or vendor B, but this multi-vendor normalized reporting.
Okay.
I think that's the type of services, that's the type of capabilities that a vendor, including aspirant type as well as the fundamental, solution vendors, can be able to offer to these service providers.
Great, thank you. And last chance for questions from the audience. Okay, so I guess 30 seconds closing comments, and that's it? Okay. Ada, if it's possible to put it on silent, that will be extremely helpful after the third time. Thank you.
Stefano?
30 seconds, closing comments, if you have any.
Well, I will just say it's been refreshing, even if not a lot of we don't have as many people as in previous pandemic. It's been refreshing to meet a lot of you this couple of days and see how completely different vendors, completely different players, we're all kind of on this journey together, and we're all learning and trying to deliver the same thing. So I think we'll continue to do good things moving forward. And I said, and I completely agree with you, it's going to be a dynamic environment, players trying to step over each other, but that's ultimately, hopefully, will deliver better service for the end customers at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Exactly. I guess, in closing, definitely, thanks everyone for sticking around and hearing us. I would say let's not rely on Gartner for definitions.
I'm with you.
Whatever else.
Just tell the enterprises, and then we're good.
Exactly. But no, otherwise it was a great conversation. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Marc.
And I was going to say the same thing. Thanks for the conversation, because I think we need that. I mean, we had some really interesting panel discussions, including the one we had yesterday, which is very complementary to this one on SASE at a little higher level. But I think that we have the ability to sort of guide this journey. It's not just a journey on autopilot. That's the closing thought that I have. And I think that each of us is striving to figure out what we can do to first position our organizations to win, but secondly to be able to help the industry migrate to this new world in the future that's cloud-based.
Great. So my closing comment would be thank you to everybody, and also to Milad and the team, although it's not the very end, but we're very close to it. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Amir.